Okay, so wind power. So come up here, what we got, bridge rectifier, while three-phase goes in, so you can use any cable, that really doesn't make any difference as long as three-phase. So our wind turbines are 48 volts, so hence the reason why we don't have heavy amperage going through. None of these are warm at all. I think the most you'll probably ever push through these turbines, they're only small ones, will probably be about 10 amp max. So cable's plenty thick enough. So we go down. It's on the neutral side, so rectifier, three-phase wild, AC in, DC out. And that's basically all the rectifier does. Changes it from a AC signal to a DC signal. Positive side goes through a fuse, and then into a bridge rectifier, and then onto a copper buzz bar where they're all linked up together. Neutral side comes down, goes through a shunt for measuring, and then onto a copper buzz bar where they're all linked up. They come all the way down. It's another bridge rectifier, just make sure nothing back feeds. And what we have is basically gauges. So these are measuring those shunts at each turbine. So the reason why we've done 3 is 1 per turbine. 2 is if we ever know that there's a problem with one of them, blows a fuse, fails, anything like that, it will basically be quite obvious in a wind, because you'll know straight away which one's not working, rather than trying to do any other kind of fault finding. But it's nice as well, data logging wise, we know which one's doing what, and we should know roughly where they are performing. So we have a 500 watt, 600 watt, and a 600 watt. Okay, so we reset all the counters all at the same time, and then we measure it off from then on our site. So they are pretty close. So just under 2,000 watt hours, just over 2,000 watt hours, and then the one which is 500 watts is just under 1.5. Okay. So AC and DC come along. The DC side goes through a shunt, so that's now measuring all of them together. Wraps around, the DC negative goes into this, DC positive comes into this, goes out, comes up, and goes into the inverter at the top. So these inverters we had to modify. And we modified these inverters because what they have on these is 3-phase wild AC in, so it would only be 1 turbine per inverter. So we didn't want to do that. We wanted all 3 wind turbines to be connected in parallel and then fed in. Cost, it works out cheaper to do that. Load, it works out cheaper, so you might have it's very unlikely you have maximum load, all of them on all at the same time. Turbines, they just don't do that. You'll have it's like small children. So you go up, you have a look, you find out 2 out of the 3 wind turbines are facing the wind, and one's decided to start looking the other way, like kids on a camera. So it's very unlikely you'll end up with all 3 all facing the direction all at the same time. So this way they can just harvest all of the DC energy at the same point and then pump it out. So and it comes out at the bottom, and that's your AC to join back into your own mini grid. So and then we've just linked them in parallel, because what we have is 1.7 kilowatts of turbine power maximum. And what we have is 2 kilowatts, 2,000 watts of inverter. So we're well over, but say then it does go over, what happens with the additional? So these inverters will do 22 to 20-ish volts, something like that, and then they will put the load on to produce up to about 60 volts, thereabouts. So say your turbines are really humping it middle of winter, there's a storm, there's a gale, and all the rest of it. So what then happens? So usually they come out at the top here, this is your dump load connections, and they go around and they dump it into something that looks like that, or something that looks like that. So those are just dump loads. And that's usually what happens. So I'm not too sure on whether it's internal to the inverters, but what I'm finding is those dump loads are wired in almost permanently, so I'm not really sure why. If it was one inverter, I'd say okay. Two inverters, okay. So maybe they're just there as putting a permanent brake on almost all the time to get the reading speed correct. So don't really know. So what we've done instead, we take our loads on the dump load side. So if it said it did go over 60 volts, so these inverters will stop trying to process that 60 volt. That then goes into these boxes here, which they're just big bus bars basically, that link and go through the switch and then down and around and go to our batteries. So it sees our batteries as the enormous dump load. So instead of dumping it to fresh air, it will dump it into the batteries at 60 volts plus. So then you go, well, what happens if your batteries are full? So if your batteries are full, the BMS would send a signal to say that your batteries have hit their voltage. They're now 100%. Initiates a little pull relay like that, little 12 volt DC car relay, and that connects this bigger relay, solenoid relay up here that came out of the Nissan Leafs. So they come when you get the big battery pack that gets underslung the car, so why not use it? And then what that then does is those connect into the dump load. So you've got to get through all that kind of stuff first before it will even pull any of these and these in. So it's just another point of safety, really. But as I said before, there's some kind of very, very weird way that internally these are wired. They should go through a switch on the dump load. Looking at it on the printed board, it does more or less do that, but what we did find is that it was backfeeding. So when we hooked it up to our battery bank, 60 volts, through there, and then comes around and then we plug it straight in. What we did find is that the dump load side, it comes through whatever it is, through the circuit board, and then it joins up straight away with up here. And then it thinks here that you're producing 60 volts coming straight from a battery, and then it starts to invert that supply. So it was basically a short circuiting or short cycling, something to that effect. So hence blocking diode. So we just blocked it. So it can only ever go from your inverter and out towards whatever the source is. It can never go from your batteries all the way through here and then through the inverter, which is what was happening. So literally, little device, very, very simple. And that sorts that side of it out. So, by doing this side, and what this would then do, and the reason why we have stuff on the AC, a lot of people say, well, why do all of this with inverter and this? It's unnecessary. You're already producing. If you're producing DC up here, why not just shove that DC straight to your battery? So the reason is, when you start to work with Sunny gear, you realise that you either stick all to AC or all to DC for control. So if we did DC here, which we had set up at the beginning, it's very difficult to monitor it. It's very difficult for the Sunny Islands to be reactive to it, because Sunny Islands in an off-grid will only be reactive on the AC side through frequency shifting. So by doing it in this method, as it frequency shifts up further and further and further and further, because it knows the batteries are full, it will terminate this first. These will just cut off when you get to 51.5 hertz AC, and these will just turn off. But the key thing is, it will throttle everything else down first. So if it's a really sunny day, your batteries are 100%, the wind is really blowing, everything will frequency shift, and eventually these will cut off. But before these cut off, they would activate the dump loads and everything first. So it's like safety mechanism, pumping into your batteries to put the brakes on, safety mechanism number 2, dump the excess energy, and then safety mechanism number 3 cuts these off completely, but still keeps your battery in circuit to still keep the brakes on. So once that part's done, this little box down here. Okay, so this is a different piece fair device. So it takes the shunt up here, this one, communicates to this little box down here. This little box down here then just gets wired with a, like Cat5. You could use telecommunications cable, anything like that. It's not heavy amperage. Converts the signal into an RS485, so that the PC can then pick it up, which is there. So by doing it here, 1, it keeps an overall log. 2, it's telling me overall amps and overall power and voltage. But at least by doing that, I can now pick it up remotely on any PC through a straightforward normal remote connection. So that's how we are then able to monitor it anywhere that we need to. So let's have a walk and see what the turbines and everything are looking like. So I hope that sorts that end out. Oh, right, yeah, one more. So up there, energy meter. So this is measuring just for its own supply at the moment. Plus we're just too lazy to do a huge amount of rewiring. So that energy meter up there, what it does, it's measuring the production of these two. And there's a little small normal grid tie usual Ging Long Solace type solar inverter with 5 panels on it, which is about 1.5 kilowatts. So they're all connected together on the AC side and then measured on that through the AC. That just goes through on a network cable and then connects up there on that hub router. Okay, so what have we got? So let's have a look. So that's the 500 watt. As I said, it's probably about at the moment about an 8 mile per hour wind, something like that. And so we got a 500, we've got a 600, and another 600. Okay. So what we've got them mounted on is 6-meter poles, scaffold steel, galvanized steel poles. Let's have a look. It's going to be difficult with the phone in the hand. Ugh. Okay. So what we have is all of those. You got a little weather station taped to it. Yeah. And guided steel rope comes down, ties in the roof structure. On the other side, it ties in on these lengths of C-channel, uni-strut, that kind of stuff. And then these are our panels. So this is not all the panels. So what we needed is we need roughly about a 40-degree tilt. So that's roughly what these are, 40 degree. So what we've got is uni-strut one side and bracketed, nothing fancy. And then on the other side, we have, just goes out into the same brackets, comes down on a length of all tie threaded rod, and then ties into the other piece of channel. So we get our angle, we got the strength. I think it's just standard M8 threaded rod, nothing special. It's very quick, easy way, and they'll just bend naturally to that angle, and then just use a tilt gauge. You could use a spirit level, you could use whatever you want, and then just figure out the tilt and the angle that you want, and then they're done. So let's go down and we'll have a look. So where are we? Oh, that's a good example. Okay, so what we got down here is the scaffolding tube that comes down from the top, and at the moment it's not finished yet, but we've got just exhaust clamps. Okay, so here you go, car exhaust clamps. And what you'll find is you don't need that part of it. What you actually want is the other part. So yeah, here we go, one of those. Yeah, so it's just straightforward 48mm, drill a load of holes, and then just use threaded rod, and bolt it all the way through. So literally goes over there and it's bolted to that. Okay, and then comes all the way down. All of this is originally they started as cold room panels, so they are probably about 60mm, 80mm. Yeah, I'd say about 60mm. 60mm thick, something like that. 50, 60mm. So they are PIR foam retardant with metal skin back and front. So the weight of this whole thing, which is all plexed together, there's enough weight there to stop any kind of turbine taking off down the road. But 6 meters is we'll see if it's going to be long enough. So so that gives you an idea what we have. So this is for those series of panels. So there's 8 panels of a certain size. So that's 8 panels on one string, one leg, of 335 watts, I think. 335 watts per panel, 8 of them, and then we got 7 of 305, so 305 watts of another, and then they both tie into one sunny boy down there. Okay, so again, nothing special. So you've got, what have you got? So that'll be one leg, and then 2 legs, and that's your AC power side tied into the grid, and then that is the communications cable, just network cable, and that's basically it. So yeah, the DC switch built in, that's cool. So yeah, what else? And then we come right down to the very end, and that's that Ginglong standard normal grid tie, not SMA inverter, tied in there, and another pole. That's the one that goes all the way to the very end and goes all the way up, and then through the roof for that 500 watt turbine. Okay. That's the other turbine, so that's our original turbine. I think that was a Thermodyne. Very, very good. Very good, very powerful, and the blades are massive. What is that? I don't know. That's pretty much 2 meters in height, I think, at least. Huge. Great. Downside being the location. So where we are not windy at all. So really, we worked out after a lot of trial and error, that turbine is great. We have one massive turbine, and that will probably do like 1.7, 1.8 kilowatts as well, if not more. But the problem is, by the time the gusts come along, it's already terminated. It can't spin the blade up quick enough to start producing, and then we've missed that gust of wind. So 3 small ones, there you go, they'll spin up really quickly, and then if that gust has then gone, then they will slow down quickly. But at the moment, everything seems to be doing well. As I said, look at that, it's like watching children. The minute you get the camera up there, they all want to look the wrong way. See? Yeah, there you go. So yeah, so they're just straightforward AliExpress. Shouts out to Jack Daniels, who figured out a reputable seller. Definitely well worth the money. But testing wise, we've only just put these up, so we're really waiting for winter for us, not so much during the night. Trying to think of, that was it, I was meant to tell you. So come back to these Nissan Leafs. Okay, so the Nissan Leaf's about 21, 22 kilowatts, something like that. Okay. And then the BMW, you actually get 8 of these in a BMW i3. So we're not running 8, we're only running 4. So we've got about 10, something like that. I think the way that it's configured, so those would be about 10 kilowatts. And then by the time you add and so on the other side, okay, the whole thing, we're running probably now about 32, 35 kilowatts, something around about there in total. So one of the reasons about, well, why are you running almost close to 60 volts and why aren't you running 48 volts? So like Sunny Island, other people will recommend, well, run closer to 48 volts. Okay, so if we run close to 48 volts, those will work, that's not a problem. The problem comes to, though, that the Sunny Islands operate best. So if you look at your maximum and then your minimum, the maximum is 60 volts and the minimum, I think they terminate at about 40 volts. So if you started at 48 volts, when it gets to 40 volts on your battery pack, it will terminate. So you may have 30% of your batteries left, but these two can't operate with anything below that. So they'll just terminate and shut off. So up the voltage to 60 volts. And now we can go 60 volts all the way down to 40 volts. So that was something else where, if you didn't know, trial and error, so that's how we knew, trial and error. That's how it basically started. That they were terminating and they still had 30% left in the battery banks. So reconfigure, change the batteries around, swap it around, add more copper buzz bars and all the rest of it, and that's how it ended up with this kind of configuration. Or otherwise you're going to find yourself sitting there thinking you've got 30% left on your batteries, and then suddenly the lights go off as the inverters just power off and everything shuts down. Yeah. So people have kind of said, well, what's the difference? What's the difference between installing things as you would for a grid tie versus installing it normally anywhere else? So what's the difference between off-grid install and a straightforward connection install? Okay, so what we have, so we've got 5 panels up here. They go up to a Sunny Boy 1.5 kilowatts, something like that. So total together, these are the same. These are 335 watt panels, so they're about 1.5 kilowatt. So if you notice, they're facing way over that side. So you go, well, it's blocked by the sun. Okay, so what they pick up is first thing in the morning, they pick up the rising sun, and then pretty much after about midday, they are more or less useless. So what you have got now is you got 13 panels, I think, of 335 on there as well. So they go through to another Sunny Boy 3.2, 3.6 kilowatt inverter. So after the morning sun, then these will pick up the next lot. And then once those are then done, as the sun tracks around and moves, so we go from the rising sun, so behind us is the little small 1.5, and the sun comes up, and then it will pick up those, and then once it's picked up those, then it will come through and then be picked up by those. So it's almost like a C-shape install. So at least at any one time there's a big bunch of panels facing the sun. And the reason why you do that is, come winter, you may not get the sun all of the time. You may get the sun only in the morning, or you may only get the sun in the middle of the afternoon or the evening or whatever. So by doing it this way, and because you're on batteries, you can only charge your batteries to a certain amount. So you can't say, well, so in total, put it this way, in total there's about probably 11.5 kilowatt or 38 panels is a better way to put it. So let's say 11.5 kilowatts of power. By trying to shove 11.5 kilowatts of power in that moment, amperage, through to your batteries, Yeah, that's probably, yes, it could probably do it. How long? Not very good. So what we've actually done is we have maximum of 100 amp charging at any one time. So it's 100 amps at about 60 volts. For us, what we want to a degree is longevity. Very decent wind. There you go. Okay. So we don't really want to charge our batteries more than 100 amp. I think it probably could do it. But would you really want to? Not really. So in this solution, we've kind of basically throttled everything down anyway. But you can only charge your batteries as fast as you can charge your batteries, and we have a lot of batteries. Enough for probably the equivalent of 2 days without sun at all. From going from 100% to 0. So by doing it this way, it's a case of eking it out. If at the end of the day, if your batteries are 80% full, do you really want 100 amps banging into your batteries? Realistically, no. So that's what the BMS does. It says, well, you're at 80%, so let's only charge it at 5 kilowatts, and then it'll be 4 kilowatts, 3 kilowatts, until you get higher up on the percentage, and then it'll be pushing power in at some ridiculous, like now, what's that, 5 amps? 4 amps, there you go, 4 and a bit amps. Yeah, it's full, it doesn't need any more. So, and that's basically what it does. So even though the sun's out, the potential to harvest more is there, but we can't push it back to the grid. So that's where it then comes in and bleed it off on hot water and ant miner. If you had air conditioning, stick that on, and all the rest of it. So that's how that is basically worked out. Hopefully that'll help you guys. Any questions? Give us a shout. I'm sure, like everything, there will always be more questions. Probably more questions than answers. So, drop me a line, throw it in the comments, whatever you need to do, and I'll try to get back to you. Hopefully, I can debunk how to do off-gridding a little bit more. And as I said, ours is very trial and error. We really didn't get into solar until a few years ago. But if you're going to do it, I don't know, go big, go home, isn't it? So in this case, hopefully it gives you an idea. All right, bye.